Over the years, Margaret has interviewed a range of property experts for her shows. This week, she brings you her interview with Tim O'Dwyer, who is a property lawyer and author.
My next guest, Tim O'Dwyer, is from Mitchell Solicitors. He's an expert in real estate contracts and, when necessary, getting out of them. He refers to these incidents as the Great Escapes.
Once upon a time I was a common or garden variety conveyancing solicitor, and then I morphed into a contract killer, known all around Australia for getting people out of dodgy real estate deals. And finally I've now put together this book called Real Estate Escapes, and it's my swan song in my retirement years to help consumers, to help real estate agents, to help finance brokers, to help everyone who's concerned about property know a little bit about the law that touches and concerns real estate transactions.
What's the greatest one that you've ever seen?
The greatest escape happened in Queensland, where a fellow, through his company, was buying a resort. And he was buying the management rights and some of the units in the resort, and everything was ready to go. 2 days before settlement, he rings his solicitor up and says, "Get me out of this contract." And the solicitor says, "Why?" And he says, "I've got a divorce coming up, and I don't want there to be too much extra property to argue over." So the solicitor sits down with the file and starts pouring through it, looking for an escape hatch. His secretary walks in and says, "What's up, boss?" And he tells her, and she says, "Oh, I've got a feeling when the disclosure notice came for that sale, it wasn't signed by the seller." And she says, "I think I put a sticky note on it and took a photocopy of it." And she had. It went to court, and the court said, "You are entitled to cancel this contract because that disclosure thing wasn't signed by the seller." The solicitors for the seller tried to argue that their covering letter constituted sufficient signing. No way. Great escape.
People try plenty of things. Which one has been the most spectacular fail?
Someone was buying a roadhouse, and they were dealing with the agent for the seller, and they were having emails going back and forth, and then at the last minute, before any contract was signed, the seller sold to someone else, and a court ruled that that exchange of emails constituted a valid binding contract.
What about you personally? Have you got any escape stories?
I had one personal escape story where my wife and I were buying a beach house for ourselves. It was a unit. We liked it. We negotiated with the agent, and then when we signed the contract, we discovered that we weren't buying off an owner. We were buying off a mortgagee exercising power of sale. Not only was it not the first mortgagee, but it was the second mortgagee exercising power of sale. And we got our finance approved, we had our valuations, everything was right to go, and then the transfer came through, signed by the mortgagee. And I said, "Well, hang on, let's just make sure if that's been properly signed, and we don't want a problem when it gets to the titles office if they haven't had the right power of sale." So I had to do some fancy questioning and some astute probing as to whether the mortgage default had been properly notified and the power of sale properly notified. And we had to go back and forth several times, and finally the sellers, through their solicitors, came good, proved that they'd dotted the I's and crossed the T's, and everything was cool.
We've got a lot of people who watch the show. They're property investors. They're buying property as often as they can buy property, but they still don't really understand that side of things, the conveyancing side, the contract side. Most people are relying on their conveyancer. What do you suggest they do if they find themselves in a situation where they might want to get out of a contract?
If it's an auction sale, it's really hard. There's a chapter in my book called Auction Escapes.
Okay.
If you're buying off the plan, there are opportunities there, but also difficulties. Essentially, if you've changed your mind, you need, before you do anything, whether you're the buyer or the seller, don't talk to the agent. Talk to your solicitor. Get the sound, solid legal advice on what you can do and how you can do it and when you should do it. in terms of getting out of that deal?